Classic cars often carry an aura of prestige, nostalgia, and timeless appeal. They're the machines people dream of owning, symbols of an era when design, performance, and personality mattered more than efficiency or practicality. But not every classic is a golden ticket to automotive glory. In fact, some cars that once rolled off the assembly line as icons of their time ended up crashing in value almost as fast as they hit the showroom floor. Whether it was due to poor engineering choices, changing market trends, design misfires, or simply bad timing, these cars couldn't hold their ground when the dust settled. Collectors avoided them, owners struggled to sell them, and what should have been legends became cautionary tales. In this list, we're diving into 14 so-called classics that looked promising at first, but instantly lost their value, and in many cases, their reputation, leaving behind only a story of what could have been. Number 14. 1980. Cadillac Seville Diesel. When Cadillac introduced the Seville Diesel in 1980, it seemed like a forward-thinking move. Fuel prices were high, and America was shifting toward more economical cars. On paper, the idea of combining Cadillac's luxury image with diesel efficiency made sense. Unfortunately, the execution was a disaster, and the Seville Diesel became one of the fastest-falling classics in automotive history. At its core was a 5.7-liter diesel V8, but it wasn't purpose-built. GM had taken a gasoline engine block and hastily converted it into a diesel power plant. The results were catastrophic. The engine suffered from weak head bolts, poor sealing, and constant failures, leading to blown head gaskets and cracked blocks. Reliability was so bad that Cadillac's reputation took a major hit, and the Seville Diesel quickly became the butt of jokes rather than a symbol of innovation. Beyond the engine woes, the Seville's design didn't help. The bustle back styling, meant to resemble European luxury sedans, was polarizing. Some buyers liked it, but most thought it looked awkward and un-Cadillac-like. Combined with the mechanical nightmares under the hood, the Seville Diesel was a guaranteed flop. Values tanked almost immediately. What should have been a collectible Cadillac became a rolling cautionary tale. Today, you can find them at bargain bin prices, and collectors steer clear, knowing that the mechanical headaches outweigh any nostalgic appeal. Instead of being remembered as a bold step into the future, the 1980 Cadillac Seville Diesel is remembered as one of Cadillac's biggest blunders. For a car that once carried the prestige of America's most luxurious brand, its fall from grace was instant and brutal. Number 13. 1974 Ford Mustang II. The Ford Mustang started the pony car craze in the mid-1960s, becoming an instant classic and a cultural icon. But by 1974, the world had changed. Emissions restrictions, rising fuel prices, and insurance crackdowns forced automakers to rethink performance. Ford's solution was the Mustang II, a car that looked the part of a sporty coupe, but fell flat in almost every other way, and its value plummeted almost as soon as it arrived. The Mustang II was built on the subcompact Pinto platform, which already put it at a disadvantage. Instead of offering roaring V8s, Ford launched it with underwhelming 4- and 6-cylinder engines. A V8 option returned later, but it was a smog-choked 302 that barely produced enough horsepower to move the car's bloated frame. Compared to the fire-breathing Mustangs of the late 60s, the Mustang II was a weak imitation. Design didn't save it either. The styling was boxy and uninspired, far removed from the aggressive lines of the original. Ford tried to market it as a European-inspired personal luxury car, but fans weren't fooled. They wanted performance and attitude, not a watered-down commuter with a famous badge. At first, sales were decent, thanks to timing during the oil crisis, but the car quickly developed a reputation as the Mustang that killed the Mustang. Collectors avoided it, and enthusiasts mocked it for decades. Unlike earlier models, which gained value as icons of the muscle era, the Mustang II sank in price and stayed there. Even today, it's one of the least desirable Mustangs ever made. The 1974 Mustang II proves that even an iconic nameplate can't guarantee lasting value. Stripped of power, character, and excitement, it instantly lost its place in the classic car world and became a cautionary example of how not to reinvent a legend. Number 12, 1982 Chevrolet Camaro Iron Duke. By the early 1980s, the Camaro was supposed to be Chevrolet's answer to the Mustang, a sporty coupe that kept the pony car rivalry alive. Instead, the 1982 Camaro Iron Duke became one of the weakest, most disappointing classics ever produced, and its value nosedived almost immediately. The problem was the engine. Instead of offering muscle car performance, Chevrolet equipped the base Camaro with the Pontiac-built Iron Duke, 2.5-liter four-cylinder. On paper, it produced just 90 horsepower. To put that into perspective, many family sedans of the time had more power. Buyers expecting the performance heritage of the Camaro name quickly discovered they had purchased a slow, underpowered car that struggled to live up to even basic sporty expectations. Styling wasn't enough to save it. While the third-generation Camaro introduced sleeker, more aerodynamic lines, pop-up headlights, and modernized features, the Iron Duke versions were wolves without teeth. They looked fast, but drove like economy cars, creating an identity crisis that turned away enthusiasts and disappointed buyers. Collectors rarely look at these base-model Camaros as desirable. Instead, they flock to the Z28 and IRO-CZ variants, which at least offered respectable power. The Iron Duke models, however, became throwaway cars, cheap transportation that never gained classic status. Even decades later, they hold little value on the collector's market, often being overlooked entirely. What makes the 1982 Camaro Iron Duke a classic failure is the betrayal of its name. The Camaro badge carried weight, built on years of muscle and performance, but the Iron Duke stripped it of credibility. Buyers thought they were getting an entry-level muscle car. Instead, they got a sluggish commuter in disguise. Its value collapse was instant and irreversible, and it remains one of the most infamous classics that lost its worth before it even had a chance. Number 11. 1977 Dodge Charger Daytona. By the late 1970s, Dodge tried to cash in on the legendary Daytona name, which had originally belonged to one of the wildest, most successful NASCAR homologation cars of all time, the 1969 Charger Daytona. But when Dodge slapped that badge on the 1977 Dodge Charger, the result was a watered-down personal luxury coupe that instantly lost its appeal and value. The problem was clear. This Daytona had none of the chaos or performance heritage of its predecessor. Instead of a race-bred aerodynamic machine with big block engines, it was a heavy, comfort-focused cruiser. Buyers were offered small block V8s, choked by emissions controls, producing lackluster horsepower numbers that couldn't back up the car's sporty name. Performance was sluggish, handling was uninspired, and fuel economy was terrible. Styling was another letdown. While Dodge added flashy decals and graphics to remind people of the Daytona heritage, the overall design was boxy and uninspired. Compared to the aggressive looks of muscle cars just a decade earlier, this Charger felt like a pretender. For muscle car fans who remembered the 1969 Daytona, this was an insult. As a result, resale values for the 1977 Charger Daytona collapsed almost immediately. Collectors didn't want them then, and they don't want them now. Unlike the original Daytona, which is one of the most valuable Mopars ever built, the 77 version is often seen languishing at the bottom of the classic car market, sometimes worth less than the cost of restoration. The 1977 Dodge Charger Daytona is a textbook example of how reviving a legendary name without delivering the performance to back it up can destroy a car's reputation. Instead of honoring the Daytona heritage, it cheapened it, and its value never recovered. Number 10. 1981 DeLorean DMC-12. Few cars carried as much hype as the DeLorean DMC-12 when it launched in 1981. With its futuristic stainless steel body, gull-wing doors, and bold promises from John DeLorean himself, it was marketed as the exotic car that would revolutionize the industry. But behind the stainless steel sheen lay one of the fastest value collapses in automotive history. The biggest problem was performance. Underneath its exotic looks, the DeLorean was powered by a Peugeot Renault Volvo 2.85-liter V6, producing just 130 horsepower. That made it painfully slow compared to other sports cars of the time, taking nearly 10 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. For a car that looked like it should have rivaled Ferraris, the DMC-12 was a huge disappointment. Build quality was another disaster. Early production models were riddled with electrical issues, poor panel alignment, and reliability problems. The flashy gull-wing doors often stuck, and the stainless steel body panels, while unique, were magnets for fingerprints and difficult to repair. Then came the scandal. John DeLorean was arrested in 1982 in a high-profile FBI sting involving drug trafficking. While he was later acquitted, the damage to the brand was irreversible. Production ceased after only about 9,000 units, leaving the DMC-12 as a symbol of broken promises. While the car gained cult status after starring in Back to the Future, its market value as a classic didn't skyrocket like most rare cars. Collectors view it as more of a novelty than a true investment piece. Prices remained relatively stagnant for decades, and many owners found their cars worth far less than they expected. The DeLorean DMC-12 looked like the future, but in reality, it was a slow, unreliable, and overhyped failure. Its value tanked almost instantly, proving that flashy looks and bold promises can't save a car from chaos under the hood. Number 9. 1975 Chevrolet Corvette C3 base model. The Corvette has long been America's sports car, but the mid-1970s brought one of its darkest chapters. The 1975 base model Corvette, part of the C3 generation, is a textbook example of how a once-proud classic can instantly lose value when stripped of the very things that made it special. By 1975, the muscle car era was under siege. Emissions regulations, rising insurance premiums, and the oil crisis forced automakers to detune their engines. The Corvette, once feared for its brutal big block power, was neutered. The base L48 V8 made just 165 horsepower, less than some family sedans of the time. Even the optional L82 engine only managed 205 horsepower, a far cry from the fire-breathing 427s and 454s of just a few years earlier. Performance figures were embarrassing: 0 to 60 in over 8 seconds, with quarter-mile times in the high 16 seconds. For a Corvette, that was chaos of the wrong kind. Styling was also stale by this point. While the C3's swooping lines were dramatic when first introduced in 1968, by 1975, the design felt dated. Safety bumpers and emissions add-ons dulled its once aggressive profile, and buyers quickly lost interest. Collectors avoided the '75 Corvette because it represented the low point of performance. Instead of appreciating in value like earlier Stingrays or later C4 models, these cars stagnated in the market. Even today, they remain among the least desirable Corvettes, often available for bargain prices compared to their siblings. The 1975 Corvette proved that not even an iconic nameplate is immune to failure. When performance disappears and excitement fades, value drops like a stone. For a car that once symbolized American power, the '75 base model Corvette instantly became the runt of the litter, proof that even legends can stumble. Number 8. 1976 AMC Pacer. Few cars are as instantly recognizable and instantly mocked as the AMC Pacer. Launched in 1975 and often dubbed the Flying Fishbowl, the Pacer was AMC's attempt to revolutionize the compact car segment. With its enormous glass area, wide stance, and futuristic styling, it looked like nothing else on the road. Unfortunately, what seemed bold at first quickly turned into one of the fastest value collapses of the 1970s. AMC originally intended the Pacer to be powered by a fuel-efficient Wankel rotary engine. But when that deal fell through, the company crammed in their aging inline-six instead. The result was a heavy, underpowered car that struggled to deliver on its futuristic promise. Later, V8 options helped a little, but not enough to fix the reputation. Performance was sluggish, handling was awkward, and the oversized glass panels made the interior feel like a greenhouse in the summer. The Pacer's odd proportions also made it polarizing. Some buyers were intrigued by its ahead-of-its-time styling, while others simply thought it was ugly. By the late 70s, the novelty wore off, and resale values plummeted. Collectors dismissed it, and owners found themselves saddled with a car that depreciated faster than almost anything else of its era. Ironically, the AMC Pacer later gained cult status as a pop culture oddball, appearing in films like Wayne's World. But that quirky fame didn't translate into collector value. Even today, Pacers remain cheap classics, more often seen as conversation pieces than serious investments. The 1976 AMC Pacer shows how bold ideas can backfire spectacularly. Marketed as futuristic, it instead became a symbol of '70s automotive missteps, instantly losing its value and never really recovering. Number 7. 1980 Pontiac Firebird Esprit and base models. The Pontiac Firebird was supposed to carry the legacy of the Trans Am, a car immortalized in the late 70s by Smokey and the Bandit. But by 1980, Pontiac had stripped away much of the performance and flair that made the Firebird an icon. The base Esprit and entry-level Firebird models quickly lost their value and became some of the most disappointing classics of the era. The problem was under the hood. Instead of fire-breathing V8s, the Esprit often came with weak inline sixes or small V8s that produced dismal horsepower numbers thanks to emissions controls. The once mighty Trans Am 400 and 455 engines were gone, replaced with detuned mills barely cracking 120 to 150 horsepower. The Esprit in particular was marketed as a luxury Firebird, but buyers expecting performance were sorely let down. Styling didn't help. While the Firebird still carried its aggressive lines, base models lacked the Trans Am's iconic hoodbird, spoilers, and scoops. Without the attitude or the muscle, the Esprit looked tame, almost generic, compared to its wilder siblings. This left owners with a car that pretended to be sporty, but couldn't deliver the goods. Collectors quickly abandoned these models. While late 70s and early 80s Trans Ams retained some nostalgic appeal, the Esprit and base Firebirds remain unloved. Values collapsed almost instantly, and they became cheap used cars rather than appreciating classics. Even today, they rarely command serious prices, overshadowed by the more desirable Trans Am variants. The 1980 Pontiac Firebird Esprit proves that when you strip a legendary nameplate of its personality and power, it doesn't matter how sleek it looks. The value disappears fast. What should have been a continuation of Pontiac's muscle car magic ended up being one of the least collectible Firebirds ever built. Number 6. 1978 Dodge Magnum XE. The Dodge Magnum XE was introduced in 1978 as Chrysler's attempt to blend muscle car styling with personal luxury. A combination that sounded good on paper, but quickly backfired in practice. With swooping body lines, hidden headlights, and a bold stance, the Magnum looked aggressive enough to rekindle Mopar muscle glory. Unfortunately, under the hood and on the road, it was a major letdown. By the late 70s, emissions restrictions and fuel economy standards had strangled performance. The Magnum XE came with a range of V8 engines, but even the top 400 cubic inch big block struggled to produce more than 190 horsepower. The 360 and 318 options were weaker still, leaving drivers with a car that looked like a performance machine but drove like a soft cruiser. For enthusiasts who remembered Dodge's tire-shredding Chargers and Super Bs from less than a decade earlier, this was a bitter disappointment. Weight was another issue. The Magnum was heavy, tipping the scales at nearly 4,000 pounds. That bulk, combined with the detuned engines, meant acceleration was sluggish and handling uninspired. Buyers expecting chaos got complacency instead. Styling, though initially eye-catching, quickly dated itself. The exaggerated lines and opera windows made it look more like a disco-era luxury coupe than a true muscle car. While Dodge tried to market it as a NASCAR-inspired street machine, fans didn't buy the pitch. Values collapsed quickly, as the Magnum XE failed to satisfy either luxury buyers or performance enthusiasts. Collectors today largely ignore it, preferring the real Mopar muscle of the late 60s and early 70s. For a car that promised to revive Dodge's performance image, the Magnum XE instead became a symbol of compromise, and one of the many classics that instantly lost their value. Number 5. 1974 Pontiac GTO Colonnade Body. The Pontiac GTO is often celebrated as the car that kicked off the muscle car craze back in the mid-1960s. But by 1974, the once proud GTO had become a shell of its former self, and it instantly lost much of the value and respect it had built over the previous decade. The trouble began with the downsizing and rebodying of the car. Pontiac moved the GTO name onto the Ventura platform, a compact car that simply didn't have the muscle car presence or proportions. The new Colonnade GTO looked more like a basic economy coupe than a fire-breathing legend. The long, sleek lines of the late 60s GTO were gone, replaced by awkward proportions and a watered-down personality. Under the hood, things were just as grim. The GTO came standard with a 350 cubic inch V8, making just 200 horsepower. Buyers could upgrade to a 400 or even a 455. But thanks to new emissions regulations, those engines were heavily detuned compared to earlier versions. Performance numbers were sluggish, with 0 to 60 times well over 7 seconds, and quarter-mile times that left enthusiasts shaking their heads. Pontiac tried to market the 1974 GTO as a more affordable, youth-oriented option, but all they really did was dilute the brand. Muscle car fans felt betrayed, as the once mighty GTO name was slapped on what was essentially a rebadged Ventura with some stripes and badges. Collectors quickly turned their backs. Earlier GTOs became highly sought after, while the 1974 version languished in the used car market, often selling for a fraction of its original price. Even today, it remains one of the least desirable GTOs ever made, overshadowed by the legends that came before it. The 1974 Pontiac GTO is a reminder that even the kings of muscle can stumble. What was once the poster child for chaos and speed became an underwhelming compromise, and its value collapsed almost overnight. Number 4. 1980 Chevrolet Corvette, California Spec L48. By 1980, the Corvette was already struggling under the weight of emissions standards and fuel economy restrictions. But nowhere was the decline more obvious than in the California Spec L48 Corvette. Built to meet the state's stricter emissions rules, this classic instantly became one of the weakest Corvettes ever, and its value plummeted right out of the gate. The California-bound 5.8 was detuned to a pitiful 180 horsepower, making it the slowest Corvette of the modern era at the time. For perspective, that was less power than some entry-level sedans. A car that once defined American performance had been reduced to a flashy two-seater, with nothing under the hood to back up its looks. Enthusiasts who bought into the Corvette nameplate were shocked at just how sluggish it felt. To make matters worse, the Corvette's C3 body style, once considered sleek and futuristic, was showing its age by 1980. The long, swooping lines and exaggerated curves now felt dated, and the federally mandated bumpers further dulled its appearance. The shark that once thrilled drivers looked more like a neutered showpiece than a predator. Collectors quickly realized this Corvette had no staying power. Unlike earlier Stingrays or later high-performance C4 models, the 1980 California Spec cars were treated as compromises rather than icons. Their resale values sank immediately, and they never recovered. Even today, they remain among the least desirable Corvettes on the market, often selling at the bottom tier of the classic car price charts. The 1980 Corvette California L48 proved that when you strip a performance car of its power, you strip it of its soul. Instead of roaring down highways, this Corvette limped, and its value collapsed just as fast. Number 3. 1979 Ford Thunderbird Heritage Edition. The Ford Thunderbird started as a stylish, sporty two-seater in the 1950s, evolved into a personal luxury coupe, and by the late 1970s, it had lost its way completely. The 1979 Thunderbird Heritage Edition represents one of the clearest examples of a classic that instantly shed its value. This version of the Thunderbird was big, too big. Built on Ford's massive personal luxury car platform, the '79 model tipped the scales at over 4,000 pounds. Instead of performance, it focused almost entirely on plush interiors, vinyl roofs, and opera windows. The Heritage Edition trim package piled on even more luxury fluff, with padded upholstery, wood grain trim, and special badging. While it looked fancy at the dealership, it had none of the excitement or character that earlier Thunderbirds carried. Under the hood, things were even worse. Buyers were stuck with a choice of weak V8s, ranging from 130 to 160 horsepower. For a car of this size, that meant sluggish acceleration and handling that felt more like piloting a boat than driving a performance machine. Gone was the Thunderbird's stylish spirit. It had become just another oversized luxury coupe in a crowded market. When fuel prices spiked and buyers moved toward smaller, more efficient cars, the Thunderbird's bloated body and lack of power made it undesirable almost overnight. Resale values plummeted, and within a few years, you could pick one up for pennies on the dollar. Collectors never rallied around these late '70s Thunderbirds, preferring the earlier sporty models or even the later downsized versions. The 1979 Thunderbird Heritage Edition serves as a reminder that when a car abandons its identity, it loses not only its soul, but also its value. What was once a respected nameplate became a symbol of excess, and the market punished it immediately. Number 2. 1975 Bricklin SV-1. The Bricklin SV-1 was supposed to be a revolutionary sports car. Designed by Canadian entrepreneur Malcolm Bricklin, it promised futuristic styling, gull-wing doors, and cutting-edge safety features. The SV-1 even stood for Safety Vehicle 1. But despite the hype, the car quickly collapsed in value and became one of the most notorious failures in automotive history. On the outside, the Bricklin certainly looked the part. Its wedge-shaped body, dramatic gull-wing doors, and bold color choices, all safety-themed, like bright orange and green, made it stand out. Unfortunately, that's where the good news ended. Under the hood, early models were powered by AMC's 360 cubic-inch V8 with 220 horsepower, later downgraded to a Ford 351, making just 175 horsepower. For a car marketed as a high-performance machine, those numbers were underwhelming, especially considering its heavy fiberglass body. Build quality was another disaster. The gull-wing doors were operated by a hydraulic system that was slow, unreliable, and prone to failure. Many owners found themselves trapped inside their cars when the system malfunctioned. Electrical issues, poor fit and finish, and lack of proper dealer support only added to the chaos. The SV-1's price tag didn't help either. At nearly $8,000 in the mid-1970s, more expensive than a Corvette, it was simply too costly for what it delivered. Buyers quickly realized they were paying for promises rather than performance. As production stumbled and the company burned through cash, Bricklin collapsed after building fewer than 3,000 cars. The few buyers who had taken a gamble watched their investments turn into instant money pits. Instead of being remembered as a groundbreaking classic, the Bricklin SV-1 is remembered as an automotive cautionary tale, one that instantly lost its value the moment it hit the market. Number 1. 1980 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow II US Spec. When you think Rolls-Royce, you think of timeless luxury, elegance, and vehicles that hold their value as coveted classics. But the 1980 US Spec Silver Shadow II tells a very different story. Instead of being remembered as a pinnacle of prestige, this model became one of the fastest depreciating classics ever, instantly losing its value once it left the showroom floor. The Silver Shadow II carried the same 6.75-liter V8 and stately presence as earlier Rolls-Royces, but U.S. emissions and safety regulations strangled performance and compromised the car's design. Federalized bumpers stuck out awkwardly, smog equipment sapped horsepower, and the car felt sluggish compared to its European counterparts. What should have been effortless power became a heavy, lethargic cruiser. Adding insult to injury, the Silver Shadow II was notoriously expensive to maintain. Hydraulic self-leveling suspensions, complex electrical systems, and hand-built quirks meant sky-high repair bills. Buyers who thought they were purchasing the best car in the world quickly learned that upkeep could bankrupt them. As reliability issues surfaced and the brand's exclusivity waned, resale values plummeted. The collapse was immediate. Within just a few years, used Silver Shadow II could be found at a fraction of their original price, sometimes less than a Cadillac or Lincoln. Collectors largely ignored them, and owners who hoped for prestige found themselves with a car that drained wallets instead of turning heads. The 1980 U.S. Spec Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow II proves that even the most prestigious badge can't save a car from losing its value when performance, reliability, and practicality don't live up to the promise. Once a symbol of wealth, it became a symbol of depreciation, earning its place as the #1 classic that instantly lost its value. Classic cars are often thought of as safe bets, machines that will always appreciate with time. But as this list shows, not every classic is destined for glory. Some cars, whether through poor engineering, misguided design, or unfortunate timing, lost their value almost the moment they hit the road. From Cadillac's diesel disaster to Pontiac's neutered GTO, from AMC's oddball Pacer to Rolls-Royce's tarnished luxury, these vehicles remind us that reputation alone can't guarantee lasting worth. Instead, they stand as cautionary tales. For collectors and enthusiasts, they're proof that nostalgia should be tempered with reality, because sometimes the cars that look like legends end up being the ones history leaves behind.